quote, because I just need to tell myself, settle down, just do one thing at a time. So it's a great way for us to start this Photoshop segment, because I want to tell you, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of things to learn. So I'm going to try to go slowly and cover one thing at a time. When I first started teaching this, I think maybe 2012, I taught it at Mont Haven, and there was one book out there for artists. This was it. And I looked all over the internet. It was called Photo Imaging for Painters, an artist's guide to Photoshop. It was like one of those big dummies, Windows for Dummies book that everybody bought, but it was like a telephone book. You didn't use it because it was too overwhelming. Or I didn't use it. So now YouTube has a video for every action or everything you want to do in Photoshop, or anything else for that matter. So whatever I don't cover, or whatever I cover and you forget, you can always Google it and go do. And that is how I learn, one small thing at a time. The first thing Mark showed me how to do was draw a frame around a picture and put like a border on it, a soft border. It was something I needed. And he showed me how to do that. And I did it several times. I was doing art camp or something, and I did it for my pictures, and I just loved it. So I did it enough times that I learned it and got better at it. This is just a slide that I have in here because I still say, try to paint from life as much as you can. Do not become a slave to the photo, unless you're a scientific copyist. You're doing journals of flowers or bugs or whatever, and you have to be exact, exactly what you see in front of you. But these old guys that say don't use photos ever, why in the world would we not use all the tools that we have around us to create beautiful things? And a lot of these guys, there's 5K monitors now, or even more, I think. And we have these monitors that are just like, you could reach in. I mean, even looking at my monitor right now, it's so crisp and clear. Why would we not use it? It's like sitting here in life. So why would we not work from these beautiful monitors and use Photoshop to try some different things? I sent this on the Facebook page, but there's a guy in the Streamline videos, David Dibble, and I've recorded it for you. I'm going to show it to you next week, but he shows you how to do a landscape composition using Photoshop, and he draws some circles as bushes, and then he uses a lot of tools, and he shows you some great composition tips that he's illustrating in Photoshop without paint. And it's a great tool to use for Zoom because you don't have to get all the paint and stuff out. This is an example. This was Peach, Miriam Forrester. This was her nieces or somebody that she wanted to do a portrait of. And so she gave me the photo. And I knew with Miriam, and I knew for myself, that we didn't want to do all these hands. So I cropped it for her. And then I put it in poster. I used a filter, poster edges filter, which helped break down the light, medium, and dark, and it helped break down the colors in little pieces. And we used this to create a portrait, and she needed a lot of help with portraits. So that's just one of the tools that I use probably most often in Photoshop, is the poster edges filter. Your phone will do a version of this, but you have a lot more control in Photoshop. You have a lot more options in Photoshop when you use this filter. Probably my favorite one of all. This next one, this is another one of my students' images, Shelby. Some of you might have remember Shelby. This was the photo of her and her siblings and little nephew. So I cropped it and I used a watercolor filter on it. And she was able to do a portrait. Oh my gosh, bless her heart. It took her weeks and weeks and weeks. And she was about 16, I think, when she did this. She did a great job on it, but she did all these hands. But you just see how, for instance, the arm is broken down into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values. And it's so much easier to apply your paint that way and then take a blending brush and move it together. So, and I've done this for most of you.
Christy, what's the name of the app in the phone?
All right, so they have Adobe, this is on an iPhone, so they have Adobe Lightroom and they have Photoshop Express on an iPhone. Those are two. And then they also have, now these are going to do some of this for you, but you haven't actually worked on these a lot. I'm going to be doing that some this month just to see how much they do. And then just Adobe Photoshop. Any of those, I think they have a free version for all of them. And then you can upgrade for more, like most of the apps are, for $2.99 a month or something. So those two. And there's tons of photo editors out there. I just have a harder time on my little bitty phone. But if you're just trying to do a quick, something quick, this would be fine. And I don't know about the filters on those. We'll look at those as we get further in. Did everybody get that? And I'll send that also in the recap. But if you're wanting to look for it right now. All right. So I made my cursor big so y'all could see it, but it's harder to use. So using some of the filters, watercolor, poster edges, we're going to look, these are some of my teachers, except for Bert Silverman, Daniel Green and Everett Kinsler, both passed away this year. But you can see how pixelated this is. This is the three artists, but you see how good it looks small, but when you zoom in on it, it's all pixelated and a mess. And so that's what I'm going to help you understand too, is how to get better images with your photos. The other thing you're going to have to consider is in using Photoshop and working with images is how much space you have on your hard drive. So I am happy to help you with that if you aren't sure how to check that, and then, getting your computer cleaned up. But what I hope to help you with also is, I have a slide in here that says, like your mail, handle it once. When you look at images, go ahead and name it and throw away. And I'm terrible about throwing away the blurred ones because sometimes I like to paint from blurred ones. So I keep them all, but try to go ahead and name the image and put it in a folder so that you can find it later instead of, just piling them all on. People bring me their phones and they're trying to show me something and they go through 2,000 pictures trying to show me. And I'll say, well, I'll be back in a minute. When you find it, let me know. But you can be better about sorting them. We're going to look at file types and I'm going to explain those to you. This is a filter on Photoshop called Gaussian blur. And you see how sometimes it's helpful if you're wanting to it's just like squinting your eyes. So sometimes it's helpful to blur your image when you first start on a piece so that you don't get distracted by the 20,000 details. The blur is a simple tool that you should be able to use in any version of Photoshop. This is a little canvas print of my mom and my sister and I. This was one of the last pictures taken of my mom. We were at Cheekwood at Chihuly. Am I saying that right? Chihuly. So it's real special to me, but there are 5 layers. This was a stationary image I found. This is a piece of lace. This is text, and this is the photo, and I used an eraser around the edge. And I did something similar for this, like this for Jeanette, with some pictures of her girlfriends. So I'm going to show you how to do projects like that, where we have lots of layers and we use different things. We turn them into transparent images, like the lace. This is another big collage I did for my son and his wife, and there were so many pretty pictures from their wedding and I didn't just want to put one on a canvas. So I laid them all out and then I used the eraser tool, and you can choose different designs with the eraser tool. And I erased the edges and I kind of cloned some of the water to make it, to move it over. So that came out really nice. I had a freebie through CG Pro Prints. They gave me a free 20 by 24 or something. So I had to quickly make something up. And I had done these portraits of my dad for my sister and my dad. I didn't have a copy of them here for me. So these are images that I put, let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. I used a phone app, a sketchbook app, You can see these pictures of me and Daddy. And I put the sketchbook app on my phone on them, and then I emailed them back to myself. This was a big piece of paper, a big, it was an image of writing, but it had to be large enough that I could stretch it and put on this huge print so that it didn't pixelate. And then I just found some things, some quotes online, and I just used those images. These are for my personal use, but I love this. I have it hanging here in my studio, and it's a cool piece for me that I didn't paint. This is one of my paintings, and I had made prints of this, and you can see I have different backgrounds. I do not like this bright orange, but I tried that. This one, and I have a quote by Corrie ten Boom on it. And I've sold several of these at art festivals. But you can see, you can try different colors out. And then what I did was I used the color picker, and I'll go in here and I'll choose one of these colors usually to try on the border. And so that's the beauty of Photoshop too, is you can pick a color that's already in your painting, and it'll be more harmonious with your painting. Here's another one of my paintings, and there's a little tea quote. If you're cold, tea will warm you. If you're too hot, it will cool you. If you're depressed, it will cheer you. If you're excited, it will calm you. My mom loved tea, and this is one of her teacups. And so this was a setup I did at Studio G when I used to paint there. So I'll show you how I laid this out. You can see that I took the eraser tool. I don't know if you can see up close, but I softened the edge with the eraser tool. It was actually a little splotch, and I just splotched the edge so that's not a hard edge. And I chose one of the greens for the border out here, and put that together. And now it's a piece of art that I can print as many times as I want and sell as many times as I want. This is one of my students, a portrait he was working on, and he could not decide what color to do the background. So I used the quick selection tool, and it's pretty, it's rough, you know, it's not something I would use, but it's good enough that I can try different color backgrounds. There is an app that you can get on your phone, and I will send that in the recap. It's called Facetune. And you can just pull your picture up, your painting, take a picture of your painting. You can go down on the bottom, and you can grab a paintbrush, and you can use your finger, and you can just color the background and try different backgrounds. It's called Facetune. So that's a very valuable tool, because you don't want to sit there and try 20 different backgrounds, because background options are endless. So that's another great tool. I'm going to show you how to do these things in the weeks ahead. This is my granddaddy, my Greek grandfather, with some of his Greek brothers, Socrates, Ulysses, Euclid, Homer. They were all named after Greek philosophers. The picture is damaged, you can see. And I started correcting it. I started correcting it the other night. So I have this one corrected, and you can see I cloned. See how the line runs through him? Should make it a little bit bigger. So see how the line runs through his face. So this is a helpful tool if you have a damaged photograph. This is limited. You can only clone what is actually there, but I'm going to show you how to clone and fix. I even started fixing the house, because you see the line runs all the way through the house. So it's kind of rough if you really zoom in, but when you're working in Photoshop, you can zoom all the way down to this, make this window right here as big as the whole screen. And then you can copy the little pixels around it and paste them in, and it's real easy and quick. But that's a really valuable tool. So I'm using my Control-Z to just go back there. This is another image that I painted from of my grandson. He hates it because he said, I look like a girl, Gran. But it was Halloween, and it was dark, and I had to use my stupid flash. You know, you all know I hate flash. But it was a precious pose of him. So you can see that this is the image. I took it in Photoshop, and I darkened it as much as I could. Then I grayscaled it. And I actually used these two to do the painting from. I don't have any shadows, so it was challenging to do, but it does help to be able to darken and up the saturation. And I use the saturation a lot because saturation just puts more color into it, and I can control how much red and how much blue. And those are quick little adjustments that you can do on your bad images. This is a family photo. You can see the dog and my grandson are blurred, which they should be. So I left them blurred. But here is the original picture, and my son and his wife are looking like they're pissed. So when I take pictures like this, I have a little remote that you can order for like $7. And so I set my phone up and I click the remote and I take a bunch, I take like 10 pictures. So I always have several to choose from. So you can see that you can see, look at Matt and Ashley here, and you can see that I cloned them. I drew around them, copied that image and drug it over and put it right on top. So this is really helpful for family pictures when somebody's got their eyes closed, or, somebody's goofing the picture up. And here I put a little blur around the edge just to get rid of all the junk, so much junk in my studio. But it just helps make you focus on the people. Here is another photo that one of my students was using to paint from, and I put a watercolor filter on it. And what that does too is it simplifies some of the objects so that you're not in there trying to paint the, toenails and all the, all the little tiny details, but you're just painting big blotches of color. It almost gives it an impressionistic feel right off the bat.
This looks like fun.
Oh, good.
So brilliant. So brilliant.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. That's what I want to do, is just give you an appetizer of what can be done with Photoshop. Yeah. This is another one. This is another one of a trip overseas somewhere. I can't remember where she went, but I put a fresco filter on it, which just, if I zoom in on it, let me see if you can see a little bit better. Oops, it's in the back. Let's see. Let's try this one. Well, darn. There we go. So you can see how it just kind of breaks things down into, again, almost like the watercolor filter. There's a fresco filter, a palette knife, and one that's called rough pastels. So there are several filters that you can put on your pictures, which are helpful because, again, we get too persnickety with everything. We make it too detailed and too sharp. Mm-hmm.
I noticed it.
Yeah, the new version is going to have some automatic stuff that just, boom, it just does it for you. You don't have to, but I'm going to show you the manual way. Yeah, and that way, that's what I know right now. And I don't have time to go figure out all the new things. This is my son, my oldest son that has the kids that I'm taking care of. So this is a 40-year-old photo. It was not printed well in the first place. It came out with too much red in it. It was the photo lab did a bad job on it, but it has since yellowed. It was hard to correct, but you see that I did correct it some. It's still really yellow. And here's another one of my boys when they were little, and it is pretty good. It's not a bad photo, but it was really yellow. So you can see I've added more blue here. And this one I've toned down the contrast. So I can't tell you how much, especially doing portraits, I have to use Photoshop, and I lighten things and fix the colors on them. So this is some of the basic ways that I use Photoshop. You can find online comparisons between the professional version and Elements. It'll give you a breakdown of exactly what they do, and so you can make your decision. You can get the full professional version of Photoshop for something like $9.99 a month. You can buy Elements for $100 for just to have the program. It was 60 something. They had a special on it. This is what Mark and I have. It's called Creative Cloud, and this is what we pay 50 something dollars a month for. I think it has more than this now, but it has, all I do is any one of these programs I want to use, I just click on it and use it. We can use it on 2 different computers at a time. So Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, Premiere Pro is a video, Lightroom, and I'm going to show you a little bit about Lightroom as well, because I use that to edit a lot of pictures at a time. Photographers use Lightroom. This is going to be on page 3 of your notes. So I've put the notes in here too, so that we can kind of stay on the same track. There are lots of different file types. You guys that have worked with Photoshop and worked with images, what is the most common kind of file that we use?
JPEG.
JPEGs, yeah. So
Yeah.
So you know that JPEGs are it. Here recently, my iPhone keeps making HEICs. Have you noticed that? All right, so those, go ahead, jump in there. Somebody's going to talk. High efficiency image. Let's see. High efficiency image format. It's in the red here because I haven't added this to your notes yet. I'm going to add it and send you an update, but it's more streamlined way of storing image files using advanced modern compression methods. It allows digital photographs to be created in smaller file sizes and while retaining their higher image quality. It says a higher image quality than its JPEG alternative. So I didn't like those at first because certain things that I use, like MailChimp, does not recognize HEIC files. So you get confused sometimes with PDF, JPEGs. So I wanted to take a couple of minutes and just explain files to you. And if you guys already know this, then just bear with me a minute. There's 2 ways to measure a file. And this was the easiest way I could think to describe it to you. There is how heavy, and that's all I could think of, is how heavy a file is. Is it 6 megabytes? Is it 6 kilobytes? Or how wide an image is. And that has more to do with viewing it and printing it. So you're going to see, when you look at file information, you're going to see a couple of different things. You're going to see how much space it's taking, how heavy it is, and then you're going to see how big it is for printing. The way that you see that on your computer, and I know this is elementary for some of you, but I still need to be reminded about it, is when you go, and let me just open a file up real quick. I've got all these different windows open here. When you open a file, you should see the file information right here beside it. If you don't, you can right click. If you're on a PC and you don't see it, you can right click on it and get the information about the file. And it will tell you right here, it's a JPEG, it's 4.1 megabytes. It was created, says 1969, but that's not true. The date it was created, it's 5,184 pixels wide, and it's 3,456 pixels tall. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about pixels as well. It is 72 dpi. That's the resolution, and I'm going to explain that to you in a minute. So all your information is right here. Why do you need to know that?
Certain companies only allow you to print something if it's so many DPIs. That's all I know.
Yes. You need to know for printing purposes, mostly, because most images look okay on the computer until you go to Zoom. You know, you'll see some beautiful artwork sometimes and you want to look at it up close, and you can't because it's just a tiny thumbnail, so you can't see it. So let me show you. Again, I think everybody understands this, but it helps me to see this up close. And this is on page 4 of your notes. But this is the way we measure files on the computer. They're measured by bits or bytes. And there's there's 8 bytes in a bit. There's 1,020, I just say 1,000 kilobytes. There's 1,000 bytes in a kilobyte. There's 1,000 kilobytes in a megabyte. There's 1,000 megabytes in a gigabyte. There's 1,000 gigabytes in a terabyte. And there's 1,000 terabytes in a petabyte. I haven't started using petabytes yet. But it's 1,024, but I just say 1,000. So that gives you an idea of what we're dealing with as far as how heavy a file is, how much room it's taking up on your computer. So if you're saving all your images in this huge, they're 20 something megabytes per image, you're going to fill your computer space up really quick. Do I ever need images to be that big? The only time I need, and that's the raw setting on my camera, and I'll talk to you about that in just a second. But sometimes if I was doing, and I wanted to enlarge a poster to be like 20 by 30, I would need a big image to be able to enlarge that. So that's when we're talking about how big a file is. The bigger files are not compressed, and they have all the information in them so that when you print them, they look good. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Now, this is how heavy they are. When we start talking about resolution, that's another, setting your resolution, that's another way of looking at an image. We think about it in 2 ways. We think about it in DPI, which is dots per inch, and PPI, which is pixels per inch. Pixels are what you have on the computer screen, and they're square like this. Dots are what you have on a printer. An inkjet printer sprays out dots of ink. So if you spray a lot of dots of ink out, you're going to have a more crisp, sharp image on your print. If you just spray out 10 dots in 1 square inch, you're going to have a blurred image. So that's why you need higher PPI. When you're going to have something printed, sometimes they'll ask you for a certain PPI. I don't run across that very much, but so when you see these 2 terms, one has to do with looking at it on the monitor about how many pixels it's going to be, and one has to do with printing it with how many dots are going to be sprayed on that print. But when I look at it again, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, that's what that is. And it's hard to explain sometimes.
I'm glad you're explaining it, because
okay.
I get a little bit of it, but not the big, picture.
And listen, it doesn't stay because, and I think I shared this with you guys before, but when I first taught this at Monhaven, there were 2 videographers there that day for some reason. I don't know what they were doing in the building, but I had a huge class and I was really nervous. It was men and women, and I was nervous about trying to explain this. And they stood there in the hallway watching me. And I was so intimidated. And when we went for a break, one of the guys came up and he said, I was just like, oh my gosh, what's he going to say? Because I know I said some things that probably weren't right. And he said, you have explained this so well. He said, I know about this stuff, but I have no idea how to explain it to anybody. And so I search constantly for some way to give you an example of it, to help you know what it really means so that we can grasp it and use it. Now, I forgot to tell you, I have this little book. It's just a little tiny book that I keep in my drawer. It's for Photoshop. So when I learn one new action, I'll make, 4 or 5 notes in here. Click on, file, open, blah, blah, blah. And I know some of you probably have that. But if I don't do it every day, or if I don't do it every couple of weeks, I forget how I did it. So, be gentle with yourself. And when you learn one thing at a time, put it in your book. And I do the same thing for anything that I have to do on my computer. Let me just touch on this for a second. So the main type of image that we use is a JPEG. So when you go to save something or work on your computer, when I'm in Photoshop, sometimes it'll give me all these options for how to save a file. What the heck? I don't even know what some of these are. But I do know that if I save the image as as Photoshop image, a PSD, it's going to save all my little actions and my little parts. Say I've put some stationery and a little quote and some text. If I save it as a PSD, which is a Photoshop file, when I open it back up again, I still have all my little parts. I can keep working with it. If I save it as a JPEG, everything is fixed, like a PDF. Like if you're working in Word and you're putting a little presentation together in Word, and you want to send it to somebody, if they have a different version of Word, when they open it, it might be all wonky. But if you save it as a PDF, it's almost like it takes a picture of it. It's not a picture, but it fixes it. And so nothing moves around. So again, I'm going to really be talking about JPEGs and PSDs. And now we have this new HEIC that we'll look into that a little bit more. But those are the main types of files. And then you'll also see RAW. If you have a SLR camera or a higher quality camera, it'll give you a RAW image option. Here, they are on page 13. And this explains some of the different terms that we're talking about right now. This is the definition of the terms. A raw image is an unprocessed image with no compression on it. Hasn't been squeezed down so that you can email it and stuff. It's a large file, and you must have a program that will work with it to open it. It won't just open in your little photo viewing app program. A JPEG, what JPEG stands for, believe it or not, is Joint Photographic Experts Group. Now, how much sense does that make? None. It's the people who invented it. It's named after them. It's the name of the committee that designed it, and it is a compressed image, basically, so that we can manipulate it and handle it. But it's the most common one that we use.
For me.
It's new. Okay, good.
Yeah, I have a question. You said something about, and I know you're going to go over it later, but you said you save it to a PSD.
Yes, and I don't know if I have that on here, but when we start working in Photoshop, I'll show you that. A PSD file is a Photoshop specific file, and it works only in Photoshop as far as I know. But what it does is it saves all of your information that you've been working on as a PSD. You won't want to send that, to your friend necessarily, because they probably don't have Photoshop. But when you're working on it, you want to save yourself a JPEG and a PSD of it. So if you want to go back later and make some changes to it, you can still do that. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. PDF, let me just give you the definition of that real quick, is a portable document format. It has captured all the elements of a printed document as an electronic image that you can view, navigate, print, or forward to someone else. An abbreviation for the NetWare Printer Definition File. We're going to be so smart when we get done with this that our heads are not even going to fit through the door. But there are a lot of different files. Now we're having, I use MPEGs when I make video files, MP4s, and it's like that's changing all the time. They're always telling you some new things. Here is an example of an image, and you can see how pixelated it is. It's showing you the different, if you were going by PPI, which is pixels per image, you can see, whoops, let me move that around a little bit. You can see that it's very pixelated here, less pixelated and sharp and crisp here. So, and you can see with the font, the difference in how crisp and sharp this is for viewing on a screen. So you want to have a good resolution for your images. This is also an example of that painting that I did. And this is a little bitty 8 kilobyte file. For some reason, one of the images got saved really small like that and compressed. So you can see, if you were to try to figure out how big this resolution is on this file, this one is 105 pixels wide and 82 pixels tall. That's what this 105 by 82 means. If we were to get down here with a little pen and try to count those pixels, that's how many pixels are in there. So you can see the more pixels you have, this one is, this one is 1,047 wide and 821 tall. So there's so many pixels that I don't see the individual pixels in this image. But that's how you, that's what that means, the pixels. And that's what we use the most is it for measuring the width and the height of an image. Here's an example of the size, because that helps me too to know if I'm looking at an image that Mark helped me with this, if I printed it, it would only be 2 by 3 or something like that. So here's one that's 640 pixels wide by 480 pixels tall. So if I printed it to get the best resolution, I could only print it this big. And here you see it goes all the way up to a total of 6 megapixels, or MBs. I guess MB is what that's kind of confusing, but the total count of pixels up and down is 6 megapixels. Let me back up.
Good Lord.
See, I told you I could confuse you. Wait a minute, I'm going to back up. I have a megapixel slide on here too. This is on page 4 of your notes. If we were to measure pixels, because again, we're talking about a little bitty inch. So when you're going to go print something or view it, you don't want to view a little thumbnail that's only an inch big. A megapixel or megabyte is 1 million pixels. So by the time you multiply this 300 by, well, here it is, 3,600 by 2,700, that'll tell you how many megapixels or megabytes your image is. This one is probably this is 10 megapixels when you multiply that out. You don't have to know that, but that's where they get that number, is how many pixels tall and how many pixels wide. Then it becomes, that's how many megabytes that image is. 6. Most of the ones that I take on my camera are like 2 megabytes. Do you notice that when you take a picture and you send it to yourself on your iPhone or whatever, it's about 2 or 3 megabytes. On my good camera, when I take it in the highest resolution for a JPEG, it's about 6 or 7. If I take it on RAW, it's about 20 megabytes big. So if you multiply, that's a lot of pixels, right? 1,000
That's a lot
pixels.
of memory.
Yeah, it's a lot of memory, but you know, these computers now, Mark just got me 2 4 terabyte hard drives. I have photos on one and I have videos on the other. It was about $100 for each drive. So they're getting cheaper and they're getting bigger because I do a lot of video stuff. So again, I think this is explained a little bit better. I jumped around a lot for you guys here, but I think it's explained a little bit better on this image. If you can wrap your head around it, it'll last about 10 minutes. But you see that it's basically the multiplication of height and width and pixels to get the one big image of 6 megabytes or 20 megabytes, whatever you're going to use to work with. Any questions about that?
Mm-mm.
I didn't scramble your brain too bad. All right. So I want to just kind of show you the basics here we've talked about file size. We're going to go to some of the tools in Photoshop, and I wanted to kind of show you the basic navigation on Photoshop. I've opened an image. You guys saw me post, I did a drawing of this lady over the holidays, and this is the way it came in. So this is my raw image off of my phone, so I haven't done anything to it yet. But basically, and it's an HEIC file. I can see that right up here in the top. Can everybody see my cursor okay? Okay. I don't want to, I really scaled this workspace down to just the basics, because when you first open Photoshop, a bunch of windows pop up, and it's really overwhelming. It's like, I don't even know what to do next. So the only thing I have open are my layers, which are basically, this is my, I only have one layer right now, which is my background, my picture, my image, and my history toolbar. These can be drug off and moved around. Like if you had a different screen, you could move these. Or now I don't know if I can get them back in there again. There we go. Those are the two that I use the most. When you come over here to your editing tools are over here on the left. And let me flip through those real quick. This, if you hold your button, if you hold the button down, it'll tell you what that tool is. This is your move tool. It is also an artboard tool, and I don't know what that is. I don't use the artboard very much. My husband does. So if I wanted to use that, I'll have to call him. This one is your marquee, rectangular marquee, elliptical. And I use this. I'll just show you. You can draw yourself a little marquee on here. And then you could do something to this border if you wanted to. I'm going to be using that some. A shortcut key on a Mac, and I'm pretty sure it's the same, is Control-Z if you want to undo that action. All right, the next one is your quick selection tool. And I'm going to be using that a lot. And you see when you hover over these tools, they give you a little drop down with a little explanation, and it'll actually give you a little tutorial on how to use it. Do those. Sometimes I get impatient with them, but hopefully I'll be able to help you with some of these things that just we need as artists. The eyedropper tool, and I don't use that very much. Spot healing. See, it's giving you a little that's a new tool that I haven't used much, but it takes things off. Your brush tool, I use this a lot. So I'm gonna be demonstrating a few things with the brush tool. The clone tool, I use this all the time to fix that picture of my granddad and his brothers. I just cloned the areas around it and made more. History brush tool, eraser tool, I use that a lot. Gradient, I don't use much. I haven't used this blur tool. I think that's new. Your text tool, this is to add text. So those are basically your tools on the left side. And then your these little, what are these called over here? Your history of what you've done. So for instance, I can go back to that rectangular. If I did 20 things to this picture, I would have all 20 actions over here on the right. And I could undo, wow. I could undo any one of those at any time that I want to. I could go back to my original picture that I opened from the very beginning. So it's almost like you have a little record of what you've done. You do have a record of what you've done, and you can move this down so that all your history will be up to 20 actions, and you can set it for however many actions you want. So that's the basic layout. Now, I use up here under File, as with your phone, there are many ways to do things. You would go to Photoshop if you want to open a new picture right here. Your edit tool, I use this sometimes to fill. There's probably other buttons that you can use as well, but you can always use these options at the top. This image one has to do with anything you want to do to the image. So I use the grayscale a lot. I click on image, then mode, and then grayscale. And it'll ask me if I want to discard the color information. and it'll give me my grayscale image. If I want to go back to my original, I just come over here to my history and I go back. Let me go ahead and rotate this. Under image, you can go and rotate the image counterclockwise. Whoops, wrong way. 180 degrees. So now I have the image. What I did to this image is I cropped it. Go back to your crop tool. And just like you do in any kind of little editing program, I just cropped it the way I want to. You do have to make sure you grab that corner. I have such a big cursor, it's throwing me off. And so that's what I use to do this little painting from. Now, if I want to make it larger, you can either go up here and use your zoom tool, but I use Control plus to make it bigger, or Command plus. That's the shortcut key. Command. If you're on a PC, it may say Control or Command, and then the plus or minus to make it smaller. You hold the Command key down and the plus key, and you make it larger or smaller. So you see how this is taken with my phone. The lady brought me a photograph. I laid it out there in my studio. It was a shiny photograph, and I zoomed in on it so that I could see. And then I ended up doing a little bit of color work to it. I put a filter on it, went over here to filter gallery, and I can choose different types of filters. Here's the poster edge. See, I can slide it either way.
Christy, do you remember in the landscape class laying that grid over the picture to divide it into, like, I think it was 9 squares?
Yes.
How do you do that?
Good question. I did it a couple times. Now I have to go back and remember how I did it. That is so funny. Because you can set that to stay on all the time. You can do the same thing on your phone and on your camera. To set the thirds grid, you want to go under Photoshop on the top left, click on Preferences, and scroll down to Guides, Grids, and Slices. Click on that, and it will open up this box that has some different options. My directions told me to grid line every 100%. So I had to go in and change right here in the center from pixels to percent, and then the subdivisions right in the middle, set those to 3. And this is one of those tricky things. And then I also changed the color of the grid right in the middle, right above that setting, from black to bright yellow, so that shows up. I don't see a way to set the width of those grid lines, but the yellow shows up best. And that's how you create a rule of thirds grid in Photoshop. The main thing I don't want you to get is overwhelmed with this, because if you can learn to do a few things with it, then when you forget, all you do is go to Google real quick and you say, you know, how do I get the grid back on Photoshop? And it'll step you back through it.
Okay.
But also, you know, if you want to open up something like I just opened, View, under View, I like to have the rulers. So if I turn these rulers on, it's going to tell me how wide something is. It's 1600 pixels. It's on pixels right now, so I'll have to figure out how to turn it on to inches. But I like to have that ruler. And also there's a guide. They have guides that you can turn on. And you can drag a guide. If you have your rulers on, you can drag a line down here.
Oh, cool.
So sometimes I'll do that. And if I could turn this on inches, let me see how to do it, because I like to work in inches because that's how we work. Let's see. Anyway, you can drag a ruler from both sides. This is helpful for your plumb lines when you're drawing. So, you know, I helped a student yesterday. I did a private lesson, and I showed her how, if you know, the front of the eye lines up with the shoulder, lines up with the middle of her boob or whatever. So you can draw those lines and move them around.
Yeah.
You can take them off. You go back over here to your history and you undo everything you've done, or you can go back and forth.
Cool.
You can go back and forth with your history tool, back and forth. So this is just really basic, but I wanted to kind of just familiarize you with the layout of just regular Photoshop or Photoshop elements and the basic things that I do when I'm working on an image to get it ready to paint from. And you can move these little bars around so that you see more and you're not, this new version again is a little bit different on how these workspaces are. Yeah. So there's my cropped image. That's what I would use. And then there's the Photoshop filter on it. I would go ahead up here to File and do a Save As. And I would save this. When I save it, I'm going to save it on my computer. And I'm going to put it in this is the file, Evelina, for this lady. And you see, it's a PSD file. I don't have to have it as a PSD. I'm going to save this one as a JPEG. And I'm going to leave the number on it because it helps me to have the number sometimes to go back and find the original. But I'm going to put Evelina poster edge. So I know what I've done to the file. Or if I've grayscaled it, I'll put GS. I've made up my own way of saving files so that I know what I've done to them. And then I'll save it in that folder, go over here to my desktop or whatever and save it as a JPEG. But you see all the options it gives you in Photoshop for different types of files. And I don't know, this is a bitmap. This is a large document format. JPEG stereo. I don't even know what most of that is. But there are lots more options when you're working in Photoshop. There's a lot of possibilities. It is a little confusing at first. One of the things I struggled with was whenever I want to do anything with this image, I need to go back here to my Move tool because I would end up being on crop or something and try to do something and it would mess it up. So I go back here to my Move tool and my selection tool or move tool, I guess you could say. So again, when you first open your Photoshop or Photoshop Elements, if you go to Window and Workspace, it has some predefined workspaces up here. So if you're a photographer, it's going to set up, it's going to set it up for you automatically with some tools that a photographer would use. If you, the default one is Essentials. So it's going to set up your history and your layers and your adjustments here. This is brightness, contrast, curves, and I'll teach you a little bit about that. This is exposure, like how light or dark your image is. So you have a lot of possible. This is brand new because I used to have to go over here under image, and I still do that, and adjustments. And then this gives you all your options for adjusting that image right there and changing it. But there's a lot of options in these little icons over here. Just when you get to learn something, they want to give you something else and make your brain have to change it and work on it in a different way to cover. Let me talk about two different types of color, RGB and CMYK. Have you heard of those terms? Can y'all see that? It says red, green, and blue is the color space for digital images. You use the RGB color mode if your design is going to be displayed on a screen. If you are going back to pixels and dots again, if you're going to be designing things for your website, for Facebook, for Instagram, you want, RGB image. If you have a choice for how you want to save it, RGB is what you want. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and has to do with your printer. If you've ever had a color printer, you've replaced all those colors of ink. So if you're going to prepare an image to be printed, if you're going to send it off to be printed, then you probably want to save it as CMYK color. And that way it's going to be able to print from, it's going to be able to pull from these colors. A printing machine creates images by combining these 4 colors to varying degrees with physical ink, whereas RGB is using the light inside your computer and mixing the colors with red, blue, and green and light on top of all those to make all the different colors that you see.
When do you, when does that come into play? When do they ask you that, or?
That's a great question, Norma. Most of the time they won't, but like some of you, I've sent you the link for CG Pro Prints, which is who I use a lot for my Giclée prints. If you go on and ask for print specifications on the website before you send your image in, it will tell you what they prefer. It'll tell you what size, it needs to be at least this resolution, and it needs to be RGB, or it will have to be CMYK most likely, but some print places will take RGB too. One is more for the computer and one is more for printing. And it's easy to remember because the CMYK is what the colors come for in your printer. RGB again is, you know, red, blue, green. I don't know a shortcut to help you remember that, but those are the 2 different options when you're thinking about how to save it. Going back to Photoshop, let's see when we click on an image if it tells us that. When you're looking at your info, yes, there it is. All right, so it's called color space. When you look at your any of your photographs, and this is just in my Finder app on my computer, this isn't Photoshop. It tells you when it was created. It tells you it was taken with a Canon 7D. Isn't that amazing? It tells you it was at 400 ISO speed, and it is RGB. Resolution is 72 by 72, and the pixels are 5180. So there's your information. It is RGB. So if you want to find out, like say you have some of your artwork.
Are you able to save it both ways, or if you have it RGB, can you do it the other way?
Yes, you can save it as CMYK. All right, so we're going to mode. There it is. I knew I could find it. So we're going to image mode. And here you can save it as grayscale. You can save it as RGB. You can save it as CMYK. You can also get down here into these bits. And Mark has explained this to me, but I don't understand how many bits they need to be. That's a whole nother thing. But these are important to us as artists because, again, printers or web-based applications need to be one or the other. So if I saved it, you know, I could just go save as CMYK. I'm going to convert this and I'll say, okay. And that way, when it's printed, it has a better chance of being more accurate in the printing. And this is a black and white, or not really black and white, but it's not the same. Can I go back to it? Yes, I can go back to it. It's not set in stone. So I always, when I'm working on an image, I always come up here to File and I save as. That way I've saved a copy of it. And that way I still have my original photo if you're nervous about, you know, losing your original photo. All right, so sending images in email, that's another issue we have sometimes. What is the most common way that you guys send your images? If you're gonna send them to somebody for whatever reason, if you have a client and they're sending you pictures, or you have to send pictures back to somebody to see them, do you email them usually? Have you had any problem with that before, saying the file is too big?
Yeah,
Yes.
sometimes they do.
Okay.
Yes.
Some of your email programs will automatically resize the file, and it'll ask you, do you want to send, my Apple Mail does that. It says, do you want to send it as large, medium, small, or the exact size that it is. When I have large, like if I have 20 pictures, or I have a short video file that I want to send somebody, right now, Apple is saying, do you want to use Mail Drop? And so it'll send it as a little zip file. So some of you maybe have gotten a little zip file. Basically, it's like they've taken all your pictures and they've put them in a little makeup bag and zipped it up and sent it to you. And then when you get it, you have to unzip the makeup bag and it'll go in your downloads folder, and then you have to open it and pull it into your folders that you want to keep it in. Basically, that's what a zipped file is a compressed, it's a makeup bag. They put them all in, then you have to open it when you get it. There's another little workaround with that too. If you're trying to send something and it's too large, if you have a Gmail account, send it from your Gmail account, and they have, let me see what it's called. It's called something. They actually put it on a server for you, and they'll send it to somebody. So it'll go through the email. It doesn't clog up your email. So I'll go to that in a minute, and I'll tell you exactly what that's called for the notes. All right, so that's the problems we run into sometimes is the size of our files being too big or being too small, and they look terrible. So always set your camera on the highest resolution. Your phone, you want to take you want to have the best pictures possible. This young girl that I did a class with yesterday, I don't want to bring up any, but she just sent me pictures of her artwork, and she had taken a picture of it laying down. So it was all skewed. And it was really hard for me to give her critique because her pictures were not straight. So I'm going to show you how to fix that. Even if you set your artwork up on the wall or you lay it flat on the floor and you try to get your phone as level as you can, because the lens is curved, you're still going to have distortion around the edge of your artwork. And I'm going to show you next week or in the weeks coming up how to use a skew tool to fix that. One of my students, Diane, showed me how to fix that. You're always going to have a little bit of distortion because you're using a curved lens. But if you lay something down and you try not to get your, sorry, I'm using a different monitor now. You don't get your camera and your artwork perpendicular, you're going to have distortion. So as I'm trying to help this young girl with her artwork, I'm putting them side by side so that I can, show her where to correct. But her images were all skewed. You don't want to send anybody a bad image of your work. The images you send represent your work. So you want to get the best image possible. Let me talk a little bit about these layers for a second, because that'll trip you up. This is, again, just a navigational thing. Let me open up a PSD file real quick that has some layers on it. All right, so here, this is a PSD file that I made years ago. You can see that my 13-year-old grandson is little. And look at all the layers here. There's 13 layers. So if I go over here and work on this, first of all, I need to have my move tool, because that's my picker tool. Okay. Everybody see? Let me make it a little bit bigger. Command plus. And here's all my layers, okay? So they all are named or numbered, called E, but they're numbered. If I wanted to move, say I wanted this one, it was being blocked. If I want it to be in front, I move it up and it'll move it in front of everything. So you need to know when you're working in Photoshop and you've started adding a lot of things on, you're going to create all these layers. It's just like pieces of acetate that are laying on top of each other. So you're going to block, if you're not careful, you're going to block certain things. So you need to make sure whenever you're working on something that you go over here and you pick the right layer. So this automatically lights up layer 5. Sorry. Again, so working on your layers, you want to make sure you have this little hand, your little move tool or your little hand. You want to go over here and select the layer that you're going to move or work on. And that gets kind of confusing because you come over here and you start to do something and nothing happens, nothing works. So just make sure that you click on the layer, and then you can do whatever you want to that layer. Usually if you have auto select on up here at the top, this little box is checked, auto select. It will automatically select whatever you click on. So you don't have to go over here and choose.
Can you just sort of move stuff around a little bit?
Yeah.
I want to see what it does.
Yes, absolutely. So this picture, you just take your move tool and you put it wherever you want to put it. When you try to do something in Word, it won't, unless you go up and do a text wrap or whatever, your images are just fixed and you can't move them around. And that's the beauty of Photoshop, is you can enlarge them. You can make them as big as you want. You can, and whatever you do to it, I can close this out and not save any of my changes. Or I can go back to my history tool. You can see I've already started making me a history. The layer order, and then opening, I go back to how it looked when I first opened it. My cursor's so big, it doesn't want to work good for me now. Okay, so again, that's just navigating. Look, this is a picture. This is a little picture I got off the internet of stationery. You saw one of the other things that I used, and I put that, this background right here is another, I have a little folder called stationery. I just went online and I copied a bunch of stationery. When you go online to find an image like that you want to use in Photoshop, and I'll touch on this more, but you want to click on the image and you want to get the highest resolution image you can to use in your artwork, because these were printed. I did these for Christmas one year and I did a bunch of them. These were printed large on canvas prints. So if I got a little bitty thumbnail stationery and tried to put it on here and stretch it, it would look terrible. So you want to try to find, and you can find a lot of freebies for stationery or wallpapers or whatever. My text box can be a little bit tricky sometimes. When you click on it, you have to come over here and click on text to begin to edit the text box. You can't just click on it and start typing. You have to come over here and hit the text tool. Now it gives you options. You can type horizontally, you can type vertically, and there's masking, and I don't know what that means, but so you have a lot of options. So now if I'm not going to type or change any of that text, I'm going to go back to my move tool. So that's probably was the hardest thing for me to get used to in Photoshop, is you got to remember, if you were using a clone tool over here and you try to go pick another picture, you're still on clone. So you have to go back and get your picker to click on something else. So I would tell Mark, I'm stuck, it won't do anything. And he'd have to come in here and rescue me all the time. But I finally went, oh, I'm not in picker. I got to get my picker back again. So all these little things. This is a little text box right here with this little swirl that I put in here. It's a lot of fun. Just doing these were family gifts. It's a lot of fun to be able to put these things together and to make them unique. So that has to do with layers. Again, if you save it as a PSD, it's going to save all your layers. So what happened is, because I saved this as a PSD, several other people asked me if I would do this for them. So I already had this template, and all I had to do was come over here and take these pictures off, delete them, and open up. I would go here and open up other pictures. Let's see, here's one. Here's that one of Mama, but let's see, here's the paper. So say I open that up. Now you're like, oh darn, where'd it go? Well, all your stuff is up here on the top, and I just take that and drag it down off the toolbar, and I have it here, and I can take it with my picker and drag it over here. So there it is. And it's on the top. It's layer 14 now. It's on the top. Now I don't want to use that because that's an under, that goes underneath something, but I have it here. If I want to put it underneath something, I'll just drag it down here and put it underneath. I don't know what all's open there. Yeah, I'll drag it way down here underneath whatever I want it under. I don't want it. I just take it off. On my history tool, I go all the way back to take it off. The problem comes when you do a whole lot, you lose some of your history, but you can always go back to your original first opened picture when you're using your history tool. Let me make this bigger so you can see it. So there's all my steps that I've taken just a minute ago with that little stationery, and I can go all the way back to my original picture here if I want to. So I haven't messed up. So that there's a lot of grace with it. These three toolbars are probably the ones I use, and I really don't use this one much, this adjustments. So I could take that off and exit out so that it's not in my way. I just want these two. I just want to use these two toolbars, and you can just take the top and drag them around on here and put them wherever you want to while you're working. I used to get mad at Mark because he would always spend all this money on monitors. And now I understand how having two monitors, you know, I can drag these toolbars over onto my other monitor and get them out of my way so that I have this whole workspace here if I want to work on this. When I'm working on something like this, I'll use my Command plus, and I can zoom way in and work on it up close. Say this is the eraser tool that I used on these pictures. And whatever I did to these pictures, I did them before I brought them over into this canvas. I worked on the picture or maybe I did it right on the canvas. Yeah, I did. I'll show you how to do that in upcoming weeks. So these are the different projects that I have open in Photoshop. So I talked a little bit about cropping and grayscale. And there's the information on page 8 for saving your image as either grayscale, CMYK, or RGB. And it tells you the definitions of those in case you need those later on if you forget.
Do you have any tips for the way you set up your computer files?
I do. And let me go ahead and just show you that. And I'll get into that a little bit more in detail. So on a Mac, you have a Finder window. I'm assuming the same on a PC. So in my photos, I have a whole drive, an external drive that's just photos. And I have art photos, family photos, friends, genealogy, household, inspirational, and then some other ones. So in my art photos, I have my artwork. And this needs to be cleaned up, you can see, but it's like sorting mail. It's an ongoing ordeal.
Is this on an external hard drive?
I have 2 external hard drives because here's the thing. If you're using a computer and you're working a lot with images and artwork, the more your hard drive gets full, the slower your computer is going to run.
Right.
It depends on what kind of computer you have, but like I said, you can get like a 2 terabyte hard drive right now for like $60 or something. You can also use this little, I've shown you this and I'll put it in the recap. This little iExpand drive. Does anybody have one of those? And so what it does is I put it in my phone. This end pulls, let me show you, this end pulls out. Let me stop the share. Okay. So this thing here goes in your phone. Let me put it up here where you can see it. And you slide it into your phone like this.
Oh.
And you get all your pictures off of it. It automatically opens and you get all your pictures off of it and you put them on here. And then you take it out and it's a USB and you stick it into your computer. It's awesome. It's only about $30.
Do you erase it off your phone?
Yes. Then I erase it off my phone. But what I do, because my images are so important to me, I want to save them and I also back them up now. But I will put this in the computer and a lot of times I'll go ahead and edit video just straight from this disk instead of putting it on my computer. And then I just save the edited video and I don't save my source video. But for your photos, you can.
What is that called again, Christy?
It's iExpand, iExpand. And I'll send you the link to that as well.
Thank you.
I've been telling everybody about that for a long time. Now, is that permanent? No, but like if you're on vacation and your phone is full, you put all your stuff on here. It can go bad. So it's not, we've had it for a couple of years now, but they've gotten cheaper and cheaper. And so you can get a really large one now. but it's a good little portable storage device. But I would suggest if you're going to do this and you have a lot of images like me, you want to get, you know, an external drive. Two?
Yeah.
You have two of them, Peach?
Now the 2 terabyte, what drive do you suggest? I mean, what do you suggest the name, like the name of it or something like that? Because I have external drives, but I need
You mean
probably
the brand?
Well, people put their stuff on the cloud. So if you want to pay for the cloud, but we like to have our stuff here. So here's a little box, and I'll have to find out what that's called. And the hard drives are in it. I have some over here in the drawer. This is high tech because I have a high tech husband, but still, you could do this. You just buy the little case for the external drive, and then you drop the drive down in here, and it plugs into the back of your computer. And
How about that?
And so these are stored away. These are my backups. And we spent, you know, a couple $100 trying to get all this backed up this year because I had old stuff and it wasn't backed up. I have my 4 terabytes are in this big thing right here. I don't know if you can see it. They're enclosed in there, and they stay in there all the time. And then when I want to back up, I put one of those in here and I back it up to that. I don't know if I could do that without Mark.
Wow.
But he fixed me all up because I have so much. You guys know how much video I post, and video takes a ton of room. And I put it on Facebook and I put it on YouTube because those are 2 places that I can store it for free. If they ever go down, it's gone. But I have a lot of albums on my Facebook page, mostly just because it's free storage. And I share it with family, but I also have it organized in all my albums. So I can go back and look for pictures, and they're always accessible to me. It's not permanent because I don't know what may happen to Facebook one of these days or whatever, or even iCloud. I don't trust iCloud 100% either because somebody else.
Well, if you have things on, you can take things off of iCloud and put it on the external hard drive, right?
Yes.
Because I want to get out of iCloud too and have everything, you know, in one place.
Yeah, and I'm happy to send you suggestions. The main thing you want to make sure is whatever's going to plug into the back of your computer, there's different types of plugs. There's FireWire, and there's USB, and there's something else. I forget what the other one's named. So you just want to make sure if you have an older computer, you want to make sure that whatever you plug this little hard drive holder into is going to hook up to your computer.
Well, I have a Mac. It sounds like you have a Mac too, right?
I do.
I have a MacBook Pro.
My Mac out there has a different hookup than this one does. So the newer ones have some, and I forget what they're called. So, okay, so let me go back to my files. So my photo files, again, I didn't like this because that's in the way. All right. I wanted to show you an example of how I store my art files. Okay, so I have one whole folder and then folders within that. So I have my most important one is my art reference images. And you just name it something so that you always know. But this is where I have copies of all kinds of artwork. And you can see, if I right click on this thing is 58 gigabytes. It's got 26,000 items in it. It's got 26,000 pictures in it. I knew I had a lot of art reference pictures, but darn, that's a lot. I started in 2011 with this particular folder, but I've been doing this for years. So you can see that I have specific artist names, animals, architecture, art books I suggest, backgrounds for collage. I mean, it's just, I have a ton of stuff in here, but these are basically all reference images. Blonde hair. So when I'm doing a portrait of somebody with blonde hair, I have a folder so that I can go and And it's, you know, a lot of this is because I teach, because when I'm telling somebody how to do something, I want to be able to show them an example. But it's so wonderful to have these things to refer to. Some of these files are actually workshops I've done with people, like Daniel Green. In that file, I have actually my pictures from studying with Daniel Green, and I have his work, and it could be cleaned up a little bit, but I have, you know, his teacher, Robert Brockman, in here. Let me see what else. Garden art. I mean, I just have a little bit. And again, these can all, it's just like the bathroom closet. It could be cleaned out. It could be cleaned up. I have a folder for models. So Denise will recognize a few of the first two, Abby and Abigail. And I have all the images that I've taken of some of these models. Lately, I'll put all, like, say I have somebody I've taken pictures of. Okay, this is a little girl, one of my little nieces. Or, all right, so this ballerina. So if I open all these up in Lightroom and I edit them all, then I'll make a new folder and I'll put edited in Lightroom. And I save them all, and I know that they've been edited and prepared. So I basically just give myself a little map of what I've done and where things are. Now, what happens is I end up with a lot of duplicate files. So I'm trying to get to where I don't save a lot of duplicate files.
Oh, yeah.
Here's one for workshops I've attended. Because sometimes, you know, I need to remember, you know, where are those pictures of that Casey Ball workshop or whatever. So, you know, here's all the workshops, some of the workshops that I've attended, or demos or whatever. I've started doing them by year, but then I can't remember what year I went. But if you do a search, you can usually find the name. I have you guys in here. Here's my students' work. I've got folders and I'm trying to organize those into years, and I can probably get rid of most of those. Plein air images. I don't know where that came from or why I needed that. Demos. Denise Klein video. Sorry, Denise. She's incognito. And then my artwork. I do have that by year because I don't date my artwork. Just because I don't want to limit myself if they ask for a certain year or whatever. Or sometimes people see it at a show and they're like, oh, that's old. You don't want to buy that. Whatever. So I don't date it. I really should have a code on the back of it because it would help me to remember when I painted that. But if I've taken a photo of it, then I'll have it in that, in that work, in that folder from 2013. And that really helps me. Because sometimes I don't think I did anything in that year. And when I look back in the 2013 folder, I'm like, oh, I did a lot of work that year. So that's a good way to store things. A new one I have in my art reference folder is flowers. And I got to where I was taking so many pictures of flowers. Let me show you this one. And I've got to update it, but I broke them down into different kinds of flowers.
Wow.
So I have apple blossoms, because these are all pictures I've taken myself. I have blanket flowers, carnations. And the easiest way to do that is to open two windows on your computer and make yourself a folder and name it with all these flowers, and then go through and just drag them in to the folders and organize them. And then it's so nice when I'm like, oh, I want to go look at some irises. And see, I don't know why these got thrown in there. These need to be filed, but here's my iris file. So I can go in here and find irises really easy. So that'll give you something to do if you're not working on Photoshop, is sit down and organize. And again, if you're not sure about how to do that, because I want to cover all levels here, I just make myself a folder here. I open it up and I make myself another window here. And in art photos, I have, where'd it go? Art reference. And I'm going to go back down to flowers. It's easier to do it this way. Flowers. Here we go. And I'm going to open up the iris folder right here. There's irises. I'm going to open the same thing over here. You guys probably know how to do this, but this is a quick way to do it for me, is to have two windows open. And we go to the flower folder. And all these, if they're irises, and I can also change how I view it. I can look at it in thumbnails here if I want to. There we go. So, and it's hard to see sometimes when they're in thumbnails. Let me go back to the list. Oops. So I'll look at it as a list. It's easier to do it that way. Whoops, I keep hitting the wrong one, solid, sorry. And I'll just drag those over into my iris folder. Come on now, there we go. This is, what is that? It's another flower. It's, but anyway, that's, what is that called? There's peonies. So I'll just drag those over into the right folder. You catch my drift. But I'll sit and do that sometimes when it's like for depression, it's like cleaning out a drawer. It's like, oh, that feels so good to get all those pictures put away. And now when I need one, I can go right to it and I can see all my iris photos in one place. You can make albums on your phone too, and you can just drag all your, so I have another one on my desktop this year. This is new for me. I have what's called a work folder. So I have my 2020 artwork, stuff I want to paint, some of my commissions. I have the people's names. And then in the commission folder, I have the references, which I should have those in a folder. And then I have my progression shots because I take pictures. So I have, you know, the work, and then I have the progression shots.
Wow.
Then I have, you know, my other stuff on here as well. I'm working on some videos. I worked on that Joel Knapp video. So I had all the pictures in that one. I can go ahead and put that up now. The current one I'm working on, I have the pictures, and then I have progression photos for that. I have my Photoshop images in there on my desktop too. I cleaned my desktop off before just for y'all. It was like I knew y'all were coming over, so I didn't want my desktop to be all junky. And I have, I'll show you. I have just got, look, 1, 2, 3, 4 folders. Zoom. Screenshots is another thing. I don't know if you guys use screenshots very much. We've got about 5 minutes. On a PC, I think it's print screen, or you might have to Google it, but on a Mac, it's Command Shift 4, number 4. And then it gives you this little plus sign, and you take it and you drag it over whatever you want to take a picture of, and then you'll hear, it takes a picture and it puts it on my desktop. Now, all of a sudden, it's called a screenshot. If I were to look at it, here it is. It's called a screenshot. Doesn't have a name. And I had, my whole desktop was full of screenshots because I do that all the time. So I put it in my screenshots folder, but I can also set somewhere, and I'm going to have to find it. I can set where I want my screenshots to go. I think you can do it on an iPad too. You can hold your button down like you do on your phone and take a screenshot. But you can select where you want those screenshots to go. Typically what I do pretty quick is I'm using a lot of screenshots here. I'll go ahead and right click and rename them what they are and put them away. And again, it's like sorting your mail. It's like if you're going to use screenshots of something, put them away so that you know what they are. Otherwise, they're just going to save the screenshot for you. But that's real helpful. Even just like for now, I've done a few screenshots of my Zoom just to remember you guys and just to have for PR. But if you got 1 or 2 things, I'll be happy if you got 1 or 2 things.
Using that much detail with your files, does it really make it easier to find stuff?
as far as how you name them,
Mhm.
for me, what it does is like if I open up and I'm going to work on a painting of somebody and I've got 6 shots in there, when I look at the file name, I go, I'll name it current pose, or I'll name it current pose grayscale, so that I can quickly look and open it up.
Yeah.
That's where it helps me the most when I'm real detailed. The other way is like I've been working on birthday videos for my family. I do little videos with slideshows in them. I'm getting to where I'll go ahead and save my favorite shots in a folder. And then if I have time, I'll put Devin, I'll put DEVDES for my kids' names. Then when I want to find pictures of Devin, instead of them being numbered, I have Devin's name on my favorite pictures. And when I do a search, all Devin's favorite pictures will pop up.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It saves me a lot of time when I'm doing projects. So the more information, and you can't put characters or anything in your file names, but you can abbreviate, but you just need to be consistent with how you name your files so that you can find them later.
Awesome.
So good. I hope that's helpful to you. All right.
Sure enough.
Shelly's got the sunshine on her again with that beautiful scarf. It's making me want to paint her.
Hey, Shelly, turn your head sideways again. I want to do another screenshot.
Look how pretty she looks. She's falling off the screen a little bit on mine, though.
No, she is sliding off, but it's
She's sliding off. Let me spotlight her.
a little more sideways. Ooh, go sideways. Ooh, perfect. Go sideways. Oh, look out. There you go. Look out the window. The other way.
Don't get my double chin.
Don't get out your chin.